spoke for about an hour about Bitcoin and emerging markets, and he had so much knowledge about money in the developing world. And I was stunned. I was like, I wish there were more VCs like this that were investing in these kinds of markets. And then it turns out, he gives me his card at the end of the conversation, and it turns out he runs Pantera Capital. And so he was actually quite well qualified for what he was talking about, and thrilled to introduce Dan Morehead.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks for that nice introduction. It was fun meeting him at the Blockstream party. Just a little bit of my background. I've managed Pantera Capital for 12 years. The first 10 of those years, we traded currencies, bonds, equities, typical hedge fund strategies. But my true passion's always been investing in big disruptive ideas, from Glasnost through Tesla Motors. And in 2011, I was blown away when I first encountered Bitcoin. It essentially combined all the facets of my professional experience, my political views, and then I could see that it was going to have a huge positive impact for a wide swath of people. So 2 years ago, we transformed our firm to be fully focused on Bitcoin. The thing I like about Bitcoin is it's going to be very disruptive, and people talk about category killers. Bitcoin has so many facets and so many different interesting use cases. I think it's a serial killer. It's going to go into payment rails, micropayments, all kinds of things that right now we can't even imagine. So, very excited about what it can do. I think when you're talking about killing, unfortunately, the thing that's being killed right now is the price. That's the only thing that's actively changing. And I'll spend a few minutes talking about the price of Bitcoin, and then get to the meat of the presentation, is really the future and where we see interesting investments. So much is made of the analog that Bitcoin is the internet for money. And I think it's a very good, useful analog. The internet is a web of interconnected protocols. Essentially, we were missing one for many years. We had protocols for all kinds of movements of data, but we were missing one for money. And even back in 1999, Milton Friedman famously said, the one thing that's still missing, but will be developed soon, is a reliable e-cash method whereby on the internet you can transfer funds from A to B without A knowing B or B knowing A. And Bitcoin elegantly solved that problem. And the way I think about it is it's essentially the last protocol in the puzzle. There is one profound exception to this analog. Bitcoin is a protocol with a price feed. How weird is that, right? There's no other protocol where you have a real-time quoted price. All the other protocols that make the internet work, there aren't shares of them or coins or whatever unit, and you can't go ask your buddy where SMTP is trading today. And if your email jams up, you can't go short SMTP. And Harry Ye just gave a great presentation on trading Bitcoin. It's, again, a pretty wild concept. They don't have conferences talking about the fundamental and technical analysis and all these chart patterns that Harry showed on HTTP. I mean, it doesn't exist. So there's probably been moments in the last couple weeks, each of us has wished that Bitcoin didn't have a price feed. The price feed screams up, crashes down, and hey, sometimes even goes dark for a few days, as we've seen recently. But I'm not aware of any other protocol that has a real-time price feed, real-time public exchange. And if you kind of take a step back and extract it and imagine, what if there was a price feed on TCP/IP? The price would have soared and crashed hundreds of times before TCP/IP actually enjoyed widespread mass adoption. It would have soared from a tiny base in the 70s and crashed and been down for most of the 80s. And if everybody in what we now call the wired world was staring at a price feed for TCP/IP, the wild gyrations up, crashes down, the pandemonium, heart attack, and depression, we probably would have all given up. And essentially, if we had a price feed for protocols like that, we'd still be doing data transfer via floppy disk. It just never would have happened. So technologies like this, like Bitcoin or any of these other protocols, go through what Gartner research called a hype cycle. And I think it's actually it's a very good illustration of the way disruptive technologies, which are incredibly fickle and go through these kind of bouts of creative destruction back and forth, go. Widespread adoption and maturity of game-changing technologies go in violent, chaotic, and even explosive bouts of kind of hype up and down. And essentially, in the first few years, you have a great technology. People, understood how important Bitcoin was. It started going. 2013 was essentially the year that kind of Silicon Valley fell in love with it and got excited about it. And the hype cycle there produced a handful of bubbles. The first bubble was in the price. There was a point at the end of 2013 where the price of Bitcoin was up 93 times where it was a year before. And Bitcoin's getting better all the time, but it certainly wasn't 93 times better at the end of 2013 than it was at the beginning of 2013. It also produced what is potentially a bubble in mining, which is being worked out right now. And then bubble in hype, basically. There was a ton of articles all predicting, it would change the world, which I fundamentally believe it will, but that it would change it within days rather than years or decades, which it probably will. So even before the boom and the bust in the price, we put together an index which we like to look at because it abstracts away from the price and tries to get at the real use of Bitcoin, that people are actually developing with it, doing something with it. We published this Bit Index a year or two ago, which we expressly excluded the price. The price is kind of like a scoreboard for the fans, but the actual use and growth of Bitcoin is based on developers actually doing something with it. The good news is, the price booms and busts, but the development or the actual underlying power of Bitcoin is still growing. Here's the 8 components of our index. And again, these have been set for a long time. They're not kind of reverse engineered to fit, the current market cycle. And they're sorted by the biggest change. And I think they actually fit that narrative that I just said. By far, the biggest change, a 82-fold increase, is in mining capacity. So we probably have overcapacity in the mining industry. Everything else, wallets, merchant adoption, all that stuff, very steady growth, up, 2 or 3 times where it was. Oh, and this graph is all about where these metrics are relative to the last price of Bitcoin, the last time Bitcoin was at the same price. The last time Bitcoin was at $200, which was November 2013. All of these metrics are growing solidly. The only one that's down is essentially the hype indicator. Google searches for the word Bitcoin are down 25% since back then. And I actually think it's probably a healthy thing. So people are building things, people are using it for transactions, people are moving Bitcoin forward, but they're not getting too hyped up. And I think the way we look at Bitcoin is to imagine it as in this kind of awkward moment. It's like any protocol or technology that comes out. It takes a while for all the apps to get built to make it useful. And again, using the TCP/IP analog, it was built in the 70s, but it took until the mid-90s for consumer-friendly applications to come about that made it useful for the rest of the world. And Bitcoin's kind of like that. 1% of the world has Bitcoin. 1% of the developed world, 10 million or so people, have Bitcoin out of the billion or so in the developed world. To get the other 99% of the world to engage in Bitcoin, we have to roll out applications that are essentially, Bitcoin neutral, or like Bitcoin's just the payment layer, and they're not directly Bitcoin oriented. And in the early 90s, when Bitcoin's kind of like the internet prior to the browser. When the browser came out, it made it useful for the other 99% of the population that would do it. And all kinds of applications came out that we couldn't even have imagined in the early 90s. I think the best way to see the future of Bitcoin is to see where the money is going. And we're in that kind of awkward phase. A lot of money has gone into funding entrepreneurs, but the applications aren't out yet. And I think that's basically 2015, is you're going to see a period of applications being rolled out and Bitcoin becoming more consumer friendly. And this is a graph of the amount of venture capital going into Bitcoin over the last 3 years. 2012, very, very small numbers. 2013, was about $100 million went into Bitcoin. And last year, 320 or so million went into Bitcoin. That's hiring tons of developers and building out products. And so I think you're going to see cool consumer applications come out over the next 12 months, and that'll get people going. It's coincidentally about the same size as the venture capital investment that went into the internet in 1995. And in that year, you had companies like Yahoo and eBay and Amazon raising money. But it's important to note, it still took many more years to get the Googles, the Snapchats, the Twitters, the Ubers. So, we're just in very, very early days, and I think there's an excessive focus on the price, and Bitcoin will just essentially grind through this and make it. So, some thoughts on what we're looking at or what we see as interesting in Bitcoin. The 4 areas we're really focused on are mobile money, cross-border money flows, security in various authentication technologies, and micropayments. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about each of those, and then at the end, if we have time, take a few questions. So a lot is made of the developing world, the unbanked population, as it's called in the developing world. And I actually think that term shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what their needs are. And it's like calling the people in the developing world unlandlined. Their defining characteristic is not that they don't have a bank. They skipped landlines completely and went straight to mobile phones. And we believe they're going to essentially skip banking and go straight to mobile money. So we've invested in a handful of companies that provide real solutions for mobile money applications. A great example is a company called BitPesa that is investing in building out mobile money solutions for Kenya. And Kenya is the world leader in mobile money. Over 3/4 of the population, adult population, uses their mobile phone for commerce. Literally, the majority of the entire GDP of the country operates on mobile money. So digital currency, mobile money, whatever you want to call it, is no longer some kind of sci-fi futuristic thing. It's actual reality in Kenya. And then the rest of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa are seeing penetrations of mobile money that's screaming. Good example of why it's going to work very well is essentially, in all these developing countries, as the analog of they chose not to build copper wires down all of their streets, they're not going to build big marble edifices with bank tellers in every village. They're going to go straight to some type of online solution. And a good kind of example of how that change is happening in the Philippines, which is a very digital country. They have 3 times more Facebook accounts than they have bank accounts. So those people are going to go straight to using a digital solution rather than banking. We're also focused on cross-border transactions. Mobile money is, it's definitely domestic. We're focused on companies that are enabling cross-border flows, and that's remittance. That's one use case. But there's also, I think, a very important need for small to medium-sized businesses to move money from one country to another. And if you think about it, it's free and instantaneous to call somebody or Skype somebody anywhere on Earth. But if you want to send, $300 to your friend in a foreign country, it takes days. You got to go to a bank, costs $45. Bitcoin as a payment rail, I think, will quickly revolutionize the cross-border money flows. The other thing we're focused on is security and authentication. There's a lot of cool things going on there. There is a company called LaunchKey that we're invested in that's doing incredible things to essentially go past passwords. The problem with passwords is passwords. They're very easy to be hacked. And if you think about, plastic money, credit cards, basically the last innovation in finance, it's just a piece of plastic with some 8-track tape glued to the back of it and supposedly protected by a pin or, your dog's name. So when all that data is stored centrally, it's very dangerous. LaunchKey is using essentially the incredibly sophisticated biometric reader that we all carry in our pockets to decentralize authentication, put it all on your personal device, and you can do all kinds of biometric scanning. You can do geofencing, so it won't authorize a trade unless you're within a certain physical location. It can have all kinds of logical questions to help authenticate trades. Also, companies like Zoppo, a storage company, is doing amazing things with very, very secure storage, where they have broken the private keys into multiple pieces in 5 different continents that are, geographically dispersed, politically dispersed in case there's a seizure of any one country. And so there are solutions like that I think are very important. And then multi-sig, I think, is going to be 2015's, interesting change. Right now, there's about 6% of the Bitcoins that are protected with multi-sig, and probably by the end of the year, that number will be over half. The fun bit, though, is micropayments. I think that if I had to bet that if we look back a year from now, Mo invites us back, and we take a look at what happened in Bitcoin, I think one of the 2 or 3 things that's really going to change Bitcoin adoption is tipping or micropayments. And it's really going to be the first killer app for Bitcoin. It seamlessly is integrated into social media, so you can send money or Bitcoin or values, to anybody in the world, free, instantaneous, no borders, no minimums, and I think it really will be the easiest way to spread Bitcoin out. When I think back on how I got started in Bitcoin, I got free Bitcoins from Gavin Andreessen's Bitcoin faucet. It was the early years where they were trying to get it out into people's hands, and I think tipping is kind of the next iteration of that. Tipping is kind of the first instance of micropayments, then ultimately it's a great way to monetize content. Right now, it's incredibly inefficient the way content is monetized, basically through banner ads. The value to a Google or a YouTube half-a-minute ad that you're forced to watch when you're clicking on a new video is 1/10 of 1 cent. That's an incredibly low hit rate, and I presume most of us would pay a lot more than 1/10 of 1 cent to not see the ad. So tipping or micropayment solutions are going to allow you to essentially escape all the ads and the paywalls. Content providers are going to be able to sell their content at a much higher rate. You think, like for example, publishers are dying because it's very hard to sell newspapers or to monetize the content. There's a certain number of people who are willing to pay this $7.95 a month to get the whole newspaper, but most of us just want an article here or there. So the entire long tail of content monetization is not able to be sold in the traditional means with fiat currency because the minimums on Visa, MasterCard, or most of the payment rails make it difficult to do under a few dollars. So I think Bitcoin is going to help all kinds of content publishers monetize that. Here's just a shot of the takeoff in one of the tipping apps, Change Tip. It really is getting a ton of traction. If you haven't used it yet, it is fun. It's a great way to send stuff, money or little bits to friends anywhere. And here's a live demo. So if you tweet me at Dan_Pantera with the hashtag for the conference, I'll show you how it works. It takes only a few seconds. So the first person to do that will get... Okay. So all you have to do is when somebody sends that to you, you just type back, lunch on me, and then at Change Tip for this, but there's a lot of other people, and send it. And that, I just sent the first person who tweeted me a lunch. The cool thing about that is we're here physically. Yeah. There you go. And anybody else, during the conference, tweet that. We'll tip a coffee for everybody that tweets in. And the cool thing about this is here we're physically together. I could walk over and give $8 to Joe who just got the lunch. But you can't do that to a friend in London from here. You can't do that to a friend in Jakarta. So it's a way to send value instantaneously, free, in 4 seconds or whatever of typing it. So it's kind of like Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, right? He had the teleporter where he teleported Mike TV. You can almost do that. You can, like on New Year's, I sent a bottle of champagne to a friend in London. The money gets there. They buy it from the waiter. They get the champagne. It's just a really cool way to be able to send things, like real physical things, like that instantaneously. And I think that's where we're going to get the other 99% of the people into Bitcoin, is by using Bitcoin, but not, they don't actually have to, deal with all the hassles of AML and KYC and, all the stuff that makes Bitcoin a little bit of a clunky thing right now. So I think my last thought is, if you really, so everybody that tweets to this hashtag will send you a coffee or 7,000 bits, whatever you want to call it. If you really, really care about Bitcoin, the single most powerful thing you can do to spread Bitcoin is to send that tip on to your friends somewhere else and keep it going around, because it's pretty wild. 60% of people who get tipped accept it, and that's a very high hit rate to get people involved in Bitcoin. That is, I think we have a few minutes to take a couple of questions, so happy to take any questions if you have it. Well, I look forward to more dialogue, throughout this weekend. Happy to, share our views on other things, and want to thank Mo for setting up this fantastic conference. Thank you very much.